space. How much of it have we actually explored? What do we know about other planets? Is it possible that extraterrestrial visitors have come to Earth and left their mark? What have we achieved through our own space exploration efforts? And how about technology? How far has our scientific research come? Have we reached the limit of our scientific breakthroughs, or is it possible to go even further? And if we did, what would be the consequences? If the secret space program does exist, why is it hidden from the public? What formed as a result of trying to hide and conceal all this information about the secret space program? And who or which groups were directly involved? Also, is there an alien technology being used against regular citizens throughout the world unknowingly?
On the private surface, there's an incredible amount of information, so many dots to connect to show that in fact there's some amazingly advanced technologies that groups and corporations, more like quasi-government corporate groups, have had these technologies for a long, long time.
I think it is absolutely ridiculous that we are dealing with the same design for an airplane that was out in the 1960s and we're still flying in it today. Meanwhile, the computer chip in your phone is more advanced than the computer chip in the plane any day of the week. It doesn't make any sense. They have this technology, they're holding this technology back. A lot of it has to do with money. It's just unnecessary. I'm not necessarily a big advocate that humans should have an enormous amount of technology, as I stated before, just because I think we would be sloppy with it. But it is actually really ridiculous that a lot of technology that could help is being held back. Certain technologies that could heal people, that could help people advance, either their bodies or even spiritually, is being held back. And I do think that we're owed to know what is out there if it can help.
So what I understand about the secret space programs, there's a lot of bartering going on, a lot of mining, and a lot of different technological exchanges. And with the amount of different agendas that there are, in the higher levels of the secret space programs, they don't need currency. It's all more about barter and enslavement.
Well, really, there's kind of two sides to this. On one side, maybe we're not capable, more like morality-wise, of even handling this kind of technology. Honestly, I can't see us, like our society today, having that kind of power. People will just kind of do all kinds of things that they probably shouldn't be doing. There's that old saying, which a lot of people thought originated from Spider-Man, but actually it comes from the Bible. It's something Jesus said, something to the extent of, everyone who has been given much will be demanded by that much. And anyone who has been entrusted with a lot will be asked that much. So in some aspect, I can understand why this technology is being suppressed. Now, there's a whole other side to this, which is there is this evil, I guess you could say this evil faction that does want to control and suppress a lot of people and use this technology against us. Now, the question is, who exactly is this evil faction?
Is there really a group of people who are actively suppressing this alien technology? And if so, then who are these people? And when did this start happening? At what point did it reach the United States? To answer this, we'll need to go back to post-World War II.
And then in 1997, on the 50-year anniversary of Roswell, a new whistleblower came forward, Colonel Philip Corso. And Colonel Philip Corso confirmed everything that I had already been hearing about for the last 4 years and had told many, many witnesses about. I'd already written about it in my private journals as well. I couldn't believe it when this insider came forward, and he even had the same things: infrared, night vision, LED lights, computer chips, fiber optics. It was unbelievable how similar it was. So with that in mind, we have to understand that the technology that we know and love today, such as the internet, our smartphones, it's all derived from extraterrestrial technology that did not originate on Earth at all, but was given to us ultimately for a particular purpose. However, what most people, again, are not aware of is that the technology that we got our hands on also included things like anti-gravity, actual time travel capability, and warp drive, where you can travel faster than the speed of light through traversable wormholes.
Alien technology was something that really was profoundly difficult to fathom by government scientists and engineers in the 1940s, when in the United States the first spacecraft, extraterrestrial spacecraft, were retrieved. These were technologies that employed systems that sometimes fused consciousness into the technology. And so it was very difficult for the US military and national security officials to kind of like understand how these technologies work. So it took them many decades to understand how the technologies worked. They had help. They had help from German paperclip scientists that were familiar with the German program that had been established in Antarctica, utilizing some of these secret space programs. They also had help from extraterrestrials as well. There were extraterrestrials that became allies to the US, where agreements were signed, and tried to help them develop some of these technologies.
As the European war moved into its final weeks, the American Army had advanced close to these prizes. But under the agreement for occupation of Germany, the United States would have to turn all this territory over to the Red Army. The American officer on the spot was Major General Holger N. Toptoy, then a colonel in charge of Ordnance Technical Intelligence in Europe, and now commanding general of the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. You had to act fast, General Toptoy. What did you do?
Our intelligence sources had told us of the role Dr. von Braun and his Army Superior, General Dornberger, had played in the development of the V-2 program. I believe that the brains of these men, if we could find them, must be put to work on behalf of the United States. After all, they were the world's only experienced missile team. I later cabled Washington and requested authorities to search for and bring 300 of the leading German rocket scientists to the United States. I found I was championing a very unpopular idea. So before long, I was in the Pentagon pleading the case in person. I finally succeeded in gaining approval, not for the 300 German scientists which I had requested, but for only 100. This was the beginning of Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip. It was approved by President Truman in 1946 in an effort to recruit top Nazi scientists before the Russians had a chance to act. In the end, the United States recruited over 1,600 Nazi scientists, many of which were war criminals committed to unpardonable crimes such as genocide. The CIA and FBI secretly sheltered many of their names from the public out of fear of public outcry.
Now, when people hear about Operation Paperclip, a lot of people in the mainstream society who maybe don't know our true history dismissed it as purely a conspiracy theory. But honestly, this was a real operation in which hundreds of former Nazi scientists were recruited by the CIA. And through this operation, you have like the birth of NASA was pretty much formed. It was literally created by former Nazi scientists. The first rocket they built was the Saturn V launch vehicle, which was instrumental in the Apollo moon landings. Now, the question is this why the secret space program truly came about? Now, sadly, this is all left out when we are being taught our own history in school. They definitely don't teach about Operation Paperclip.
And of course, what they were working on didn't stop at NASA. Nope. These former Nazi scientists eventually got incorporated into other jobs throughout our society, such as banking, teaching, industry leaders, aerospace design, the list goes on. Many of these scientists were known to have committed horrendous war crimes, like experimenting on alive humans with biological weapons, but very few were actually prosecuted. This went on up until about 1990, and some say behind the scenes, these former Nazis are controlling many things in our government, which sounds kind of like Hydra in Captain America: Winter Soldier. Many say that when NASA was first created, it was only a public cover for the real space program, which was operating secretly behind closed doors.
And it's very important to touch on the idea here of compartmentalization. People might ask, well, how the heck are these secret space programs kept so secret if they're, so much money goes into them and the technologies are so incredible and they've gone on for so long? Well, when you have compartmentalization, in other words, this scientist in this cubicle has no clue what this scientist or this researcher is working on right next to him or right down the hall, right? And when you're working on these particular projects, you're just working on one tiny piece of it. So you could be working on a tiny little section of this part of the craft or the engine or the cockpit or whatever the case. These scientists might think they're working on a part for the International Space Station. They could have no idea that they're actually working on a part for a secret anti-gravity craft that's going to be built, With compartmentalization, you could have thousands and thousands of people working on this one craft, but you could only have, maybe 3 or 4 that know the big picture of how it's gonna end up as the end result. Great example is the Manhattan Project. We had tens of thousands, if not 100,000 different people working on the nuclear bomb. None of them had any idea what they were actually working on until the first nuclear bomb was dropped. So compartmentalization is key to understand how these are kept secret. There's so much money that's gone on to them. This technology is just absolutely mind-blowing, and it's very much real.
So in the summer of 1947, the National Security Act was signed, which basically is the birth of the NSA, by President Truman. And like I said before, you have the CIA and the Majestic 12, which were all formed in the same summer that Roswell happened. So here we have former Nazi scientists now heading many areas of our own country and literally hiding this from the public. But what people don't know is that there is a lot of UFO crashes between, around like 1947 to 1952. And one of them in particular was even bigger than Roswell, but not many people talk about that one. Now, Truman needed to have a secret group that could operate outside of Washington. And from my understanding, really, this is how Majestic 12 came to be. A group that could bring in this alien technology and study it without being bothered by anyone.
Is this so-called Men in Black or Majestic 12 a real group of people or purely just science fiction? In 1980, classified documents were released to UFO researcher Jamie Shandera, explaining how President Truman needed a secret group to recover extraterrestrial craft and guidelines on how to proceed. The FBI posted these documents on their official website, but stated that these documents are bogus. However, if we trace back the steps in history, we can actually find proof that this secret organization truly existed. So, what does that mean for the history we are taught in society today?
Okay, so the story goes that after reports were flowing in the late 1940s of these strange UFO crashes from all over the country, Truman realized he needed a group to take care of these extremely sensitive cases and hide it from the public. So the then Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, teamed up with Dr. Vannevar Bush, the head of the CIA, who, by the way, was in charge of the Manhattan Project, which was responsible for creating the atomic bomb, Allen Dulles, Nelson Rockefeller, and the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, along with a few other of these high-ranking military officials, they were to take control of all extraterrestrial contact.
So some people believe that James Forrestal felt that this Majestic 12 group was getting a little too powerful since it was able to operate outside of any government jurisdictions. And actually, he wanted to go public on what the group was truly doing. Now, a lot of people say he was more idealistic and a religious man and didn't like all this secrecy about the UFOs and extraterrestrials and actually wanted to tell the public the truth about what was going on.
James Forrestal began to talk to other party leaders and was eventually asked by President Truman to resign. Forrestal was then placed in a mental institute and killed himself by tying a sheet around his neck and jumping out a window. However, evidence emerged that broken glass was found inside his room, suggesting a struggle, and that his suicide note was forged.
So after President Truman signed the National Security Act, you can pretty much say from that point on, the official stance of the US government on aliens and UFOs and all this stuff definitely did not exist. And anyone who says they do exist are probably hallucinating, seeking attention, have maybe mental issues, or are just seeing, meteors in the sky and whatnot.
I think the scariest part of all of Operation Paperclip is what followed. So now we have Nazi war criminals responsible for murdering thousands, if not millions of people. And these Nazi scientists began to continue the research the Russians and Hitler were working on with mind control and paranormal experiments. This spawned actually the most famous mind control project that everyone talks about, MK Ultra. The name MK was a mix of English and German, and it meant like mind control. Many of these so-called scientists working in the 70s on Project MK Ultra were all former Nazi scientists.
Nazi scientists recruited in the U.S. Mind control. Experiments on humans? Could all this be true? And if so, what were these mind control experiments all about? And more importantly, are they still going on today?
So MK Ultra was another top secret operation that came about from the US after studying what the Russians and the Nazis were doing. I mean, really, this is a humongous rabbit hole in itself, but there are many declassified documents and other documents saying that the CIA was trying to cover up these documents about the experiments they were doing, but this all got out in the public sphere. Now, the Nazis were using new drugs, such as LSD that came about, electrical shocks, radio waves, other means to kind of try to control people. So once the US found out about all of this, they began their own testing, and really this is how the drug LSD came about. I mean, they were even testing it on each other without them knowing that they were testing it on each other. So eventually, the CIA started to do an experiment in Canada where they tested LSD on students and faculty without them knowing. The CIA had denied this for years, but finally in the 90s, they actually quietly admitted to it.
There is a Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino who is actually a reported satanic worshiper, and he later became founder of the Temple of Set. He was unofficially put in charge of the MK Ultra program. So one of these tests that he oversaw in the MK Ultra program was having the subject undergo brain surgery where they would get chips put in their heads to remote control the person's mind, if you can believe that. They successfully did this with dogs. However, it was never revealed if they were able to do this with people, but why were you experimenting with dogs if you weren't going to do it with people? But this kind of makes you think twice about that movie, The Manchurian Candidate. So was it just a movie or was it based on real life? The movie came out right before JFK was assassinated, was pulled from the theaters, and then re-released later.
So there's a document that someone just seemed to pull out of a fire stating that Lancer, which is the code name, the Secret Service's code name for JFK, was asking too many questions specifically about this Majestic 12 group and what they were doing. So the document asked each member of the Majestic 12 group to submit their views by October on how to handle the situation with Lancer, JFK. Of course, we all know what happened on November 22nd, 1963, when he was assassinated. So, the question I want to raise is, was this the real reason why he was killed? Now, you have Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA during this time and allegedly part of the Majestic 12. So, was Lee Harvey Oswald just a scapegoat? Or worse yet, is it possible he was really under some form of mind control?
U.S. working with aliens, Nazis, and secret experiments on humans? If all of this is real, could this be the reason why President John F. Kennedy was assassinated? Could it be possible to get people to do things against their own will? What kind of technology would need to be used? And where did it come from? How easy would it be to control humans with advanced technology without their own knowledge of it?
I've been a professional remote viewer for over 20 years now. Remote viewing was essentially funded and developed by the CIA through the Stanford Research Institute in San Francisco in order to turn psychics into spies, to use them as intelligence assets to get information on things they otherwise physically couldn't get information on. In 1995, this program was declassified and I became obsessed with it, so I sought out training, formal training in it. And I must have been, pretty good and had some talent, because not long after that, I got pulled into a civilian-run think tank as a professional remote viewer. At a certain point, it became incredibly clear that there was some organization who was intent on bringing us down as a company. I was the focus of it. There would be people in the community who would spread lies and slander about us. There was even a website that was developed to just slander us. It was obvious what was going on and that somebody really wanted us shut down. Now, when we remote viewed who this somebody was, it was basically an intelligence operation. I won't name the agency, but it was an agency intelligence operation in order to get us out of the field and get our business closed down. We had an investor who was basically blackmailed out. We had the IRS basically take our assets. There are different methods in which the harassment's conducted. So, devices can be hacked. The individuals followed everywhere. There can be hit and runs with the same or similar vehicle on a regular basis. House broken into repeatedly, listening devices placed in the house outside of the smartphone, public smear campaigns, even down to directed energy weapons being used. In fact, the energy weapons are one of the most prevalent and damaging aspects of being targeted.
So there's all these technologies a long time ago that were taken into these black projects and began to be developed there, okay? So that answers the technology component, right? These technologies absolutely exist, and they're far different than the standard model of physics we're told. It's very important to understand that a lot of what we're told in our mainstream education system, not just elementary and high school, but colleges, especially universities, it's wrong. It's unfortunately wrong.
So this is why this is such a critical time as far as technology goes, because there's both very advanced technology that has more to do with sound, color, frequency, and technology that has a lot more to do with mind control and artificial intelligence.
We know that they've developed technology where they can pulse and modulate microwaves so they can control emotions as well as place thoughts and images into a person's head. And now the technology, though, has grown and expanded in such a huge way since MK Ultra. You know, some whistleblowers have even said that they can track people now with scalar waves via satellite and do remote brain scans so they can further tailor this more individualized experience, as scary as that is. You know, the result of all this immense physical and psychological suffering is meant to completely destroy a person on every single level.
And the flip side of that coin is these advanced technologies are being built and used in order to create a larger network to keep control over the population of this planet.
In our history, the role that alien technology and the secret space program has played really goes all the way back to Roswell and this crash that supposedly occurred of an alien ship way back in, I think it was 1947, in July 1947. And we were given all kinds of tech that the nations took, and the nations took that technology, and we saw this huge explosion of conventional technology in 1947, right after that, that led to all kinds of things, the microwaves and many other inventions here all over the earth. So I think in that way, supposedly the secret space program contributed to the advancement of humanity. But now, it's ever since Roswell, it's been used, I think, against humanity.
In the past, the advancement of technology was always thought to be a positive force in the development of our society. With the emergence of more convenient and technologically advanced ideas such as wireless communication, smartphones, portable TV, or round-the-clock tracking software, who could deny that technology could do anything other than improve our lives? But is there more to what can be on the surface? Could there be a more sinister reason for developing this technology? And is it possible that this tech could be used to harm people? And if so, what would be the reason?
I first started to notice the targeting in 2012 during a divorce that was starting to happen between me and my ex-husband, well, now ex-husband, and that's when I first noticed the targeting.
Targeted individuals, or simply TI. Who are they? How have they been targeted? And for what reason? Could technology be used for a darker agenda that's set in place to target humankind?
A targeted individual, or a TI, is a person who's been targeted for individualized harassment. In other words, they're someone who has unwittingly been placed into an extensive program to manipulate and control them. You know, the ultimate goal being to ruin their life. Now, the common denominator is typically someone who has gotten on the wrong side of a government institution or a powerful person. At base level, a targeted individual has become an enemy of the state. You know, to a certain degree, every one of us is a targeted individual.
I think the motive of my targeting had to do with a revenge or a hate crime. My ex-husband, he's kind of a powerful person, and he had told me, you know, when we decided we were going to get a divorce, and he had said, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." And when he said that to me, you know, I'm like, yeah, everybody says that, you know, you're just angry. But he was right. I had no idea what he was capable of. My ex-husband works in the aerospace industry, and his company is contracted by the Department of Defense. There was multiple people involved in this targeting. I had got poisoned a year and a half ago.
What are the effects of being targeted by certain technologies, and in what ways does it affect the human body?
You know, within the targeted individual world, you also have a lot to do with energy weapons, with non-lethal weapons, they call them, that are meant to instill thoughts or fears inside of you. Now, as a remote viewer, you can feel this happening to you, but there was other occasions when they were remote influencing us that it felt like they were directing energy weapons at us. For instance, you would begin to feel this very intense, dark, horrible, death is imminent at any moment, start to flood through your body, and you could not stop it. It was like being hit with an extremely high-powered electromagnetic pulse.
And I had like shooting pains in my lymph nodes, that, you know, my neck right here and under my armpits. And I knew that, you know, he had poisoned me, and I didn't know the reason why that was done. So I knew that there was something, you know, that was put in my body. I just didn't understand what it was, and I've always wanted to know. But at this time when he did this, I had knew a bunch of experts because I've been, you know, helping other targeted individuals. So I contacted a doctor who is a toxicologist, and she's an expert in nanotechnology. And when I talked to her, she had told me, you know, send me a piece, you know, your hair follicle, and I'll test it for you. And I sent it over to her. It took about 3 weeks until I got the test results back. And she said I had tested positive for nanotechnology and gamma radiation and about 5 or 6 other drugs. Let me explain a little bit about the semiconductors. They're not actual chips like you would see in the movies. These are made with your own material. They're along with nanotechnology. It takes part of your own material and builds it, and it kind of looks like just like a piece of meat, like from your flesh, not your skin, but your flesh. And it has all these wires, these gray wires that are coming out of it that I guess connects with the nervous system. And the places that I do have the semiconductors, it kind of flutters or like pulsates, and just like mostly the one on my foot, that one pulses the most. Another part of the technology was they were pulling my consciousness out of my body, and which is very scary when that's happening because that doesn't happen to me anymore. And also it feels like when you're being hit with these directed energy weapons, it feels like it's like a blast to the head where it's like pressure and heated, and it comes in through here, and sometimes it'll exit out to this side of the brain, and you can feel tingling and like your brain is actually moving. And it's very disturbing. It does interfere with my thought process, and sometimes I'm not able to speak correctly, where I'll be stuttering. I know the thought that I have in my mind, but it doesn't want to come out of my mouth.
And being a targeted individual basically means that the ones doing it want you to know that, well, you're targeted. You know, the whole intent of this is to completely ruin your life. And the methods are geared to sound so insane to regular people that they think you're a paranoid schizophrenic. And this is a huge part of the isolation tactic that they use.
Another part of the technology was electric shocks on the body, where they will electrocute you. And also, when you're being hit with these weapons, you can feel it. Like you're walking and you can start feeling the ground vibrating, but it's actually you vibrating. It feels like it's vibrating, and it feels like kind of like a wave of energy coming at you, and it's not nice energy. It's very intrusive. And then that's when they're able to speak to your thoughts and respond to your thoughts, and they're not nice. When they talk to you, they're not always nice. You know, they do play the good cop, the bad cop. Like even today, right now, they're trying to convince me that they're helping me, that they arranged all of this, and you know, and it messes with your mind, your thought. Like you don't know what's real.
Is it within the realm of possibility that advanced technology can be used to control humans in such ways? Can directed energy weapons be used to manipulate people physically and change their thoughts and notions?
So in 2018, Muckrock, which is a nonprofit news organization that specializes in filing Freedom of Information Act documents, they received these mysterious papers about mind control. Now, what they were asking for was completely unrelated, so it kind of seems that this was on purpose, but these papers had infographics explaining some very interesting things, such as psychoelectronic weapons. So it stated that these weapons can pretty much do anything from controlling our dreams, controlling body movements, induce changes to even your hearing, induce sexual stimulation, and even reading and broadcasting our thoughts.
So on these papers that were released, we ended up talking with James Scott a while back, who is an expert on cybersecurity issues and is contracted through various agencies within the US government. He confirmed with us that these payloads, as he calls them, can be placed anywhere in smartphones, on your computer, through 5G waves, which are being used to cause physical harm in people, or in some cases, mind control.
So as part of the payload, maybe it's just a frequency that emits from the computer where you can't hear it, but it has a physical effect. Migraines, vomiting, aggressive behavior.
You know, we are electromagnetic beings, and our brain inputs and outputs EM frequency. This could be manipulated in oh so many ways using exotic technologies that have been developed by the military-industrial complex. Now, some of these effects can include like burning sensations in the brain and throughout the whole body. And they can cause damage to health, including radiation burns, tinnitus, hypertension, organ damage, electric shocks, even tumors in the brain. One of the most insidious sides, outside of the physical damage is the psychological damage. And this is really the spearhead of the targeted individual programs.
If such people could be targeted in the world with undisclosed and sophisticated technology like this, could there also be a bigger picture with other motives of targeting individuals like Desiree, other than personal ones? Is this perhaps why this type of advanced technology had to be concealed?
Recently, it was reported in the media that Cuba was actually using sonic weapons directed at Americans staying in Havana, and even a few reports came out that these people were forgetting their words and were actually feeling sick. Then you have the same thing happening in China, where US officials staying in China were getting severely attacked by these sonic weapons. I think it was somewhere around like 15 of them were being affected by this. It got so bad that the US government had to issue warnings to any officials or persons going to that area in China to be very careful and report back if any symptoms developed.
Now, I want to bring up a case which I thought was kind of strange. I'm not saying I believe him entirely, but it is something to think about. Aaron Alexis, who was the Navy Yard shooter who killed 12 people in DC in 2013, claimed that he was being controlled by low-frequency electromagnetic waves, and this was all according to an FBI official who obtained his computer. So according to the FBI official, the direct quote was,
"Ultra-low frequency attack is what I've been subject to for the last 3 months. And to be perfectly honest, that is what has driven me to this."
This is one out of countless cases. Many believe a lot of the recent high-profile shootings were the result of some form of mind control through either drugs, directed energy weapons, or even microchips. But the question I think everyone has is why?
But outside of general population control and brainwashing, people can get targeted, let's say if they're a whistleblower, right? Or if they're an activist, or a researcher, even of conspiracy theories. Maybe even a contactee, a veteran, or private individuals who have angered someone who works within a TI program. They even select regular people for testing, and people who are connected to military families.
I think that this is being done for non-consensual human experimentation, and that we're being used as guinea pigs. And my theory is that they want to have everybody under this technology, and we're the first wave of it. And the biggest group of people are in California. California is the capital for targeted individuals. So I would like to have this technology taken out. Unfortunately, there's no doctors that we know of that are willing to remove the chips. We've had several TIs have the chips removed, so that's how we know what they look like. But the doctors that did that lost their license, and the reasoning they lost their license was because they got in trouble for taking something out that they didn't put in. I think this technology is back engineered by alien technology because it's so far advanced that I honestly don't believe that a human would have access to this kind of technology. Not at this time. I definitely think it was back engineered from alien technology. We're far more advanced than I could ever imagined. I was not aware of anything like this. I've heard of the MK Ultra experiments, but I didn't think it would ever happen to me, or but yeah, I'm aware that, we are way far ahead of technology than the public knows about.
While the motives are clear on why advanced technology was hidden, the question now turns to how. How exactly was this concealed? Who was involved, and in what ways? Taking a close look at the U.S. patent system in the 1950s might shed more clues on this question.
One way that a lot of these extremely advanced technologies are kept secret is through the patent system. Back in 1951, there was an act passed in Congress called the Invention Secrecy Act. And this Invention Secrecy Act basically said that any branch of government, whether it's the FBI, the CIA, even the State Department or the Navy or the Department of Energy, any of them could classify a patent as top secret, and possibly even more secret than top secret, if they felt that this patent posed a, quote, risk to national security. And of course, that phrase, a risk to national security, is very vague. It can be taken many, many ways. And one way these free energy technologies and these anti-gravity technologies have been kept secret is because they're classified as top secret when the inventor tries to patent them. So the control of the patent office has actually been instrumental in keeping this technology secret, because the inventor tries to patent it, boom, classified. It's never going to see a light of day. It's actually said that T. Townsend Brown's patents were then classified once the military-industrial complex figured out what he was actually doing. And as of this year in 2019, it said that there's about 6,000 patents that have been classified. A lot of times they simply just blackmail or pay off these inventors, or just kill them off if they need to.
The total body of information that we have on the secret space program is quite incredible. It is truly the greatest secret of the globalist elite. They have been using our money to pay for this.
Hiding advanced technology and high-level secrets could involve a large sum of money. So, where did the funds come from? One case can be examined by going as far back as the 60s and 70s.
So in the 1960s and 70s, this is when the government waste started happening. As if the government wastes money. They don't waste money, they just steal the money. It says it's wasted. But really in the 1980s, this started to get figured out by some individuals who were working in the Pentagon and sort of questioning, well, why doesn't this add up with this? There was a man by the name of Franklin Spinney, and he released what was called the Spinney Report in the 1980s, and it went around the Pentagon, and it actually leaked out to some people in the media who printed it, because our media wasn't quite as controlled back then as it is now. And this Spinney Report became very famous, where he was detailing, at that point, a few $1 billion of this government waste that he just couldn't account for, right? That was back in the 1980s.
The other aspect to this was that they were using NASA as a front to get money for their real space programs. I mean, really, the Apollo astronauts went to the moon in a tin can. It is possible that it cost them billions of dollars, but what if it only cost them millions, and most of those funds went back to the large black space programs?
We can then fast forward to 2001, the day before 9/11 of all days. The day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense, he admitted on congressional record that $2.3 trillion was unaccounted for from the Department of Defense budget. Now, mind you, the DoD or the Pentagon has never been audited before 2018, actually, but that's a different conversation. Before 2018, it had never been audited. That's a lot of money that's never been audited. And we can sort of trace the growth of this unaccounted for money. So in the 80s, with that Spinney report that he was detailing, could have been in the few billions. Donald Rumsfeld admitting $2.3 trillion unaccounted for. Of course, the next day 9/11 happens and everybody conveniently forgot about that. And then in 2016, a Department of Defense Inspector General report was released that said that that money was now up to possibly $6.5 trillion in, they termed it as misadjustments, unaccounted for monies, right? So a lot of money now. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. And this has been siphoned to research and develop these highly advanced technologies.
We're kind of, as a human race, caught in the middle without realizing that our tax dollars are funding some of the layers of these secret space programs that are more based in the currency that we see on Earth.
It's very funny. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Independence Day with Will Smith, the first one in 1995. There was a scene where the president gets brought down to Area 51, and he had never been briefed or read in on Area 51 before, and he's looking around, he goes, "How do we pay for all of this?" And one of the supporting characters in the movie says, "You don't think they spend $40,000 on a toilet seat, do ya?"
My God. Why the hell wasn't I told about this place?
2 words, Mr. President. Plausible deniability.
I don't understand. Where does all this come from? How do you get funding for something like this? You don't actually think they spend $20,000 on a hammer, $30,000 on a toilet seat, do you?
So yeah, they'll make a few missiles or this part for the space station, whatever the case, but the rest of the money goes into creating whatever sort of secret spacecraft, flying disc, flying black triangle, cigar craft, whatever the case is. Or maybe some secret facility under the ice in Antarctica or on the backside of the moon, And what they do is they take the rest of that money that they were given, they were signed off on, and then it goes into those other black projects.
I think it's easy to assume that if the military has this technology, that other races have this technology, that other parts of the human race have this technology, that corporations are throwing millions to billions to trillions of dollars into a lot of these quiet, classified projects that we're just unaware of. And they could be even being contracted out by these military agencies who need this kind of a work. Private sector usually is more advanced a lot of times than the military because they're a lot more nimble and they can do things quicker with different kinds of assets that the military doesn't necessarily have. So contracts between corporations and the military would absolutely be a normal thing, and the technology is out there.
It's funny how the general mainstream thinks that disclosure is really going to happen through the mainstream media and through our elected officials, when the truth is, in reality, it seems to be they're controlling the narrative, where this definitely isn't where it's going to be, where disclosure is going to come out from. When the narrative is around, do UFOs and aliens exist? We've been asking the same questions for decades, ever since Roswell. The same question over and over again. Sure, they throw out something, here's a little blip in the sky or something like that, But where's the big stuff? And I believe they are suppressing the big stuff. For example, there's a lot of shows out there, such as, on mainstream television that we're seeing that does talk about disclosure. And what we're being told is that these shows are given this much information about really what's going on, yet they're presenting maybe only 10% of this information to the general public. The point is they want to keep asking the same question, do aliens and UFOs exist? Because if the public truly knew the truth, we would start asking all kinds of questions such, well, if we know aliens and UFOs exist, how long have they been here for? What kind of technology do they have? Have secret programs really existed with our US government? And, it brings up too many questions. Is MK Ultra real? Is Project Paperclip real? So by keeping the narrative around do aliens and UFOs exist, people don't ask these other questions. And I think it's our role as a society to truly bring this stuff out to the public, to allow people to understand that there is way more going on than what we're being told. I do think that people in the military and some elected officials do want the truth to get out, and slowly we're seeing an avenue where this truth is starting to be exposed.
Black projects, private sectors, and historical events. Could these all be related to funding the concealment of advanced technologies hidden from the public? What about other cover-ups? Could larger, more mainstream organizations have even played a part, especially when it comes to space?
We have to consider whether there is any program now, regardless of its cost, which offer us hope of being pioneers in a project. It's possible to spend billions of dollars on this project in space to the detriment of other programs and still not be successful. We are behind, as I've said before, in large boosters. We have to make a determination whether there is any effort we could make in time or money which could put us first in any new area. Now, I don't want to start spending the kind of money that I'm talking about without making a determination based on careful scientific judgments as to whether a real success can be achieved, or whether, because we're so far behind now, this particular race is, we're going to be second in this decade. So I will say to you that it's a matter of great concern, but I think that before we break through and begin a program which would not reach a completion, as you know, until the end of this decade, for example, trips to the moon, maybe 10 years off, maybe a little less, but are quite far away and involve, as I say, enormous sums. I don't think we ought to rush into it and begin them until we really know where we're going to end up.
What would happen if the secret space program and advanced technology was revealed to the public, and even mainstream media would start to talk about it on a regular basis? What would it mean for our current society and living as we know it today? Could it be possible to use this advanced technology to benefit society and humankind? Or would it have the opposite effect and destroy the very roots of our civilization that we've been working so hard to build since the beginning of human history? Find out in the final part, coming soon to edgeofwonder.tv.